Hey, what's going on, everyone? Lauren Sisler here, hanging out at 11 o'clock Central Time on the dot. Matt Scalisi joining me now to talk about the SEC Championship. Alabama winning the 2020 edition of the SEC Championship game. Final score 52-46 against the Florida Gators. And, well, Matt, it was entertaining to say the least. One of the more entertaining games of the season, in my opinion. Obviously, a hard-fought battle by both teams, but Alabama coming out on top and certainly stealing the win there with the sack on Kyle Trask to close things out to alleviate any potential challenges with the Hail Mary at the very end. So, just get your initial thoughts on sort of what you saw out there and, what stood out to you the most.
Well, I mean, it was a game that Alabama was always in control of, but it was – they just couldn't quite put them away. I think it was. I would say if you want to look at the negative side of it, Alabama did not adjust in the second half the way that Florida did. I think that Florida, coaching wise, had a better second half than Alabama did. I don't think necessarily the Alabama players, had particular execution issues that came up in the second half. I think they got out-coached in the second half a little bit. But that said, they came up with big drives when they needed to. To me, the one that really jumps out in this game, I mean, I would say that the last scoring drive for Alabama where they capped it with the score to Devontae Smith, to me, that's the kind of drive you have to make to win championships, and that's exactly what Alabama did in that moment. And it never really felt like they weren't going to, I think Florida did put them in some third down situations, but it just didn't really seem that difficult for Alabama to move the ball and score for most of the day. There were times when they couldn't stop Florida. And, I think it was flashbacks a little bit to what we saw early on in the season for this Alabama defense. Frankly, there's not too many situations where you have to go up against the type of personnel that Florida has in Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts. I mean, they lived up to their billing. They lived up to the hype. And, they were incredible players. They're just pretty tough to stop as well as you could possibly play them. They're just so good at what they do. But look, Alabama has gone 11-0 in SEC games. No team has ever had to do that before. It's an incredible accomplishment. And this is really the only game where they were even challenged, where they even had to kind of sweat at all in the fourth quarter. I think this season overall has to go down as one of the most impressive accomplishments that we've seen from an SEC team.
Yeah, obviously an exciting one. And I think that was kind of the thought process going in, or at least for me anyways, that we were going to see an Alabama team kind of have to go down with the fight. We've seen what this Florida team is capable of. I think last week against LSU, was a bit of an anomaly, if you will. And maybe in some ways kind of fueled this Florida team, because when they took the field and just the energy and the physicality and everything that you saw out there, they were laying it all out there. And of course, obviously, Kyle Trask not having a great game last week certainly came out, had a tremendous, outing today. His statistics kind of, jumping out 408 yards, total yards, 3 touchdowns, and really, throughout much of the game, even in the first half, I never really had this feeling like many games with Alabama this year that this Florida team was just going to go away, that Alabama was going to come in second half and just dominate. Coming out of that first half performance, obviously, Florida not converting and certainly, had their backs up against the wall. But I do feel that Alabama, their defense obviously, struggled there some in the second half. And then, of course, the big thing that I want to point out and talk about and get your thoughts on, Landon Dickerson going down with what was an apparent knee injury. That's what the broadcast team, Jamie Erdahl, had announced, that they thought it was a foot injury or leg injury, but she had said it was, in fact, a knee injury. So that could certainly play a big factor moving forward. So that's something to highlight. And to see that image on the screen of all those guys out there surrounding him there, Patrick pulling it up for us. I mean, that says a lot. And it's crazy because, he had a smile on his face. the broadcast team had said that Alex Leatherwood was over there on the bench crying, and yet Landon Dickerson's over there giving everyone a wink and kind of just saying he's going to be okay. So I certainly think that that's a huge injury and something to, that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Hopefully, for his sake and obviously for the team's sake, that he's able to come back and make a playoff run. But that's a big impact injury right there, and someone that certainly, would be missed if he's not able to play the rest of the season.
Absolutely. He's been not only an important player on the field all year, but has been, from what we hear, sort of an emotional core of the team.
Oh, yeah.
And has been a big leader on that team. So losing him is a big deal for any amount of time. Hopefully we end up hearing some good news about him and it's not as big a deal as it seems. But I think you have to at least be concerned about that. This is Alabama. They've got good guys on the depth chart behind the starters, but nobody with that level of experience. And certainly it's just not going to be the same level of play at that position. I do think, it may not be an issue that shows up as much in the semifinal. And not to take anybody lightly here, but I think one of the things that was kind of a running storyline throughout the day in college football, Lauren, is right now it looks like Alabama and Clemson, and it's hard to find another team that looks like it's on the same level as those two. So it kind of feels like whoever Alabama plays in the semifinals, at least on paper, is going to be overmatched. Now, can you beat them with a hand tied behind your back? Not necessarily, but I guess what I'm saying is it's probably more important for Alabama to get Dickerson back for the championship game than it will be for the semifinal. But we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. Maybe they don't get him back. And they have to figure out a way to get it done and win other ways. And we've said about Alabama's offense all year, they're not just one thing. They're not one-dimensional. They do a lot of different things, and you have to be that way on the offensive line too. You're not a great team if losing one player makes you not a great team anymore. So I think this is a big moment for Alabama. They've got a couple of weeks to figure things out here, and we'll see how they respond. But look, I think you have to give Florida a lot of credit in this game. What Alabama was doing in the first half was demoralizing. I mean, they were punching Florida in the mouth over and over again. It really felt like the game was out of control, and Florida didn't give up, and they came back and responded. And I think that's a sign that they're a really strong team with good leadership. But I also think there were moments in this game, and Dickerson going down is one of them, where this Florida team showed kind of a lack of, boy, I hate to pass judgment and sound this way, but almost a lack of character. I mean, I think that they lost composure in that situation, and we saw some of that happen multiple times during this game. They had key penalties at really bad times that kept Alabama alive. And sometimes that's the difference in a game like this. I mean, it almost certainly was in this particular game.
Yeah. Well, and kind of looking at the stat sheet, on the flip side of that, Alabama also had some penalties that obviously came at inopportune times that, gave Florida some opportunities. But to your point, what I like what you said about this, and this was something that you and I had talked about on the pregame show earlier, is that Alabama came into this, offensively so efficient and being able to attack in so many different ways. And it showed up tonight, 605 total yards, 418 passing, 187 on the ground. Najee Harris had himself a night. And I think that was the biggest thing coming in, is that Florida, we knew, could attack through the air, and that Alabama's secondary was really going to have to step up. But in terms of the running game, they had 54 yards rushing. And so, there just wasn't a dynamic force there on the ground. And, Alabama kind of had to force them to be one-dimensional. And certainly it showed up in the first half. But like you said, the Gators clawed their way back. They continued to fight. And it made for a really exciting game. This year, really, we've only seen that a couple times with Alabama, right? The Texas A&M game put up more yards, and then of course Ole Miss, obviously, definitely a lot more back and forth than we've seen any other time this year. So, anybody sitting at home watching this has to look at that and be like, wow, that's pretty good. And I do want to point out our buddy, Deshaun Davis from Auburn. He's done some work with us at AL.com, and I kind of love what he says here. He tweeted out, he said, I don't care who you cheer for, play for, etc. If you don't respect what you've seen from Alabama the past few years, you're a hater. That is a dynasty. I don't like them, but I do respect them. Thought that was pretty good stuff there coming from our boy Deshaun Davis.
It means the most is when it comes from across the rivalry aisle.
Yep, absolutely. And when you can see that, and I mean, I think it's so true. And this season's really hard, Matt. And I would love to get your kind of take on it because I think a lot of people want to put an asterisk beside this season and an asterisk beside what could be a national championship for this Alabama football team. But when you see how they went out there and performed, and, this team has performed at such a high level all season, but I'm not even just talking on the field, what they've been able to achieve off the field and that composure and, just the buy-in. We've seen so many programs just kind of falling apart, crumbling, getting marred and by COVID and those things happen. And that's not to say like it's a cultural thing just because this team was, decimated by, COVID and this wasn't. But when you just kind of look at the opt-outs and the transfer portal and all these moving parts, if there's one team out there that has kind of set the stage and had this precedent, it's like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. Just what Alabama's been able to do and just to kind of, sort of hold their own and sort of really sort of set the standard in college football for like the team that just kind of has it all. Like they're like the prom kings here, right? They're the ones winning that popularity contest.
That's what we called it this morning. It's funny. We were talking also about the Heisman race, Lauren. Yep. It's the same thing. And I think, it's crazy that we came into this game today saying, it's between Kyle Trask and Mac Jones and Devontae Smith. And what happens in the game, right? Najee Harris runs for 178 yards, the 2 touchdowns on the ground. And then he also receives for 67 yards and 3 touchdowns. If you were guessing based on, if this was the first time you ever saw Alabama this year and somebody asked you who you think their Heisman candidate is, everybody would have said Najee Harris based on the game. And that's just what kind of team this is. Now, I don't necessarily know that Najee is suddenly going to be the guy, but this at this point, this team, and some of it is because it's a weird season, and a lot of teams just didn't have their stuff together. Not everybody is playing at 100%. This is the kind of year where being a team that has every possible advantage and all the resources really benefits you and shows more than other times. Is a year when every team has disadvantages suddenly because of what's happening. Well, the disadvantages don't mean as much to Alabama because they have such a built-in buffer over everybody else. And the results of that.
I like that. The built-in buffer. That's such a good way to put it. I mean,
it's almost ridiculous because we're here at the end of the season. And I realize they were in a close game tonight, and maybe they lose in the playoffs. But right now we're in a situation where, as good as Alabama's been during their run under Nick Saban, we're basically having arguments about which Alabama player should win the Heisman. And it's more than 2 people.
Hey, let me ask you this. Has it ever been, I mean, I'm going to say no. I'm going to go ahead and say it probably never happened. In the event, 3 people, the top 3 Heisman candidates, have they all been from the same team ever? Have there ever been like the top 2 from the same team before?
In 1945, Army had the top 2 finishers in the Heisman Trophy candidate. So, Lauren, we're talking about World War II and the Army Academy. That's the last time this happened. So there is no equivalent of this in modern college football. This
Unbelievable.
I don't know how it's going to wrap up. I guess if you ask me right now, I would probably say that, and I'm talking to Ben Flanagan, who you often see on this show, when Lauren's not with us, when she's off doing important stuff on TV. But Ben Flanagan just messaged me a minute ago and said, if basically if you had told me that Devontae Smith was going to have 15 catches, 180 yards, and 2 touchdowns tonight, we all would have said he's winning the Heisman. But I don't know, because Mac Jones had 418 yards and 5 touchdowns tonight. And to me, that's a Heisman performance. I think that if I had to guess right now, I would say that I think Mac Jones is going to win the Heisman. But I really don't know exactly how it's going to shake out. I don't know if these guys are going to split votes. I don't know if Trevor Lawrence suddenly is a guy that people fell in love with today because of the ACC championship. It does feel very much up in the air. If I had to pick somebody right now, I would say I think Mac Jones is your Heisman winner.
Well, if I had to vote, I'd just say cut the trophy in thirds and give them all like an arm and a leg and a.
You have to say that Najee should be a finalist for the course of his whole season. But I mean, what he did tonight was incredible. I mean, he was the MVP of this game. He is the reason Alabama won this game more than any other individual player.
Well, and I will say you foreshadowed that a little bit earlier today, kind of talking about.
I did, Lauren.
It always seems
pretty smart.
These days, I know, right? It's like that. It's like the Heisman commercial with Tebow and Kyler Murray on there, and he's like predicting everything. It's so funny. He's like, "Yeah, you're going to see and this and that." It's funny. I love that. And one thing I will go back to with Najee, and that's just kind of looking back at his career and sort of. There was a time, and I remember this vividly because we have this opportunity not during COVID times when. We get one day during the postseason that we get to go like talk to the guys. We get to spend as much time with them as we want in that 1 hour window. Everyone's clamoring at them. And there was a time where Najee Harris was nowhere to be found, did not want to be found, did not want to talk to the media. And you ask why? Well, that's because he was going through a pretty rough patch where he just felt like he wasn't getting the opportunities. He wasn't, he wasn't where he wanted to be personally in his football career. But I think he also felt like he was not being given those opportunities that he had hoped for. And I remember just that frustration. And then we at AL.com had the opportunity to go to Hawaii with Tua Tagovailoa, and Najee Harris was there along with his mom, Tiana. And, I remember having conversations with her, as well as Najee. And it was kind of this thing of thought process of like, we're going to, they just won the national championship. They were coming off the national championship and, almost a little bit of a sigh of relief. But in some ways, I think Najee felt like he hadn't arrived yet. And that he was
a tough fit. I mean, you're talking about a guy who flew across the country to come play at Alabama, to play. And I think sometimes people make a lot of that, of the transition from not being from the South to living here. But, it is a big deal. Going from California, from basically Bay Area, California, where Najee's from, to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, it's a tough transition. It's a very different way of life. And I do think it took him a little time to get comfortable in Tuscaloosa. But I think a lot of it did come down to the class he came in with. That signing class has ended up being incredibly productive, and from very early on. I mean, by the end of their freshman season, you're talking about Najee played a key role in that 2017 national championship game, and obviously Devontae Smith made one of the most important plays in Alabama football history.
And sometimes I forget about that. Like.
Yeah. I don't think I really knew that much about him when he made that play, to be honest with you. And now here we are 4 years later. It feels like that was a very long time ago. And these guys are back in Atlanta and they're winning an SEC championship tonight. And they're about to take a team that is basically favored to win the national championship into the postseason. And I mean, we'll see how it turns out for them. But that recruiting class is going to end up going down as one of the most successful that Nick Saban has ever had, and one of the most, productive that the SEC and college football has ever seen.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Patrick pointed out when I was asking about the Heisman, he had said something, I guess in the 70s or 80s, 3 people from another team did get votes. And another thing I guess I wanted to pull up, he said he had video that one of our beat reporters, Michael Casagrande, got of Landon Dickerson coming back out for the trophy ceremony. And so certainly.
Yeah, we can play that if you've got it.
Great to hear that. I imagine Nick Saban will be giving an update of some sort on the press conference here in the post.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a situation where they say they're going to have to do scans on him tomorrow, and we'll see. But Patrick's actually, our producer's got video of Landon Dickerson after.
So they, of course, carting him back out, and again, we kind of learned on the feed, I guess, or on the broadcast, Jamie Erdahl had updated and said it was a knee injury. He had crutches there as he's being wheeled back out on the field. So obviously speculation at this point as to how severe it could be. And again, I think Nick Saban will give us a sort of a brief update, probably not a whole lot of information. I think that we'll learn more come Monday. But certainly looking forward to the selection show tomorrow to figure out where things shake out, how things are going to kind of move in a different direction. And oh, by the way, did you hear the Rose Bowl? It looks like it's going to Dallas, huh?
Pretty weird. That's going to be different. I mean, I think you got to make sacrifices this year. Things are different, and that's the right thing to do. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do to play it. And with what's happening in Southern California right now, where COVID is particularly out of control, and the government there has decided it's just not safe to have crowds of any variety. It's the right thing to do to move this game to a place where it's safer and where the families of the players can actually be there and attend the game. I mean, this is college football still. As I don't fully agree with everything Brian Kelly says, but I do agree. Like, what are we doing this for? If we're saying that no one's allowed to watch these things happen, it's kind of absurd. So let's do it in the best way we possibly can that preserves as much of the actual joy of this activity as we possibly can while still keeping it safe. So Dallas seems like the good move to me. It also happens to work out that probably nobody from west of the Mississippi is going to be in the playoffs. So I'm sure everybody's travel budgets appreciate it too.
Yeah, and speaking of keeping it safe, our buddy Lambert here said, I like how much time they spent making their sets look nice. Did the guy have to kick his 4-year-old out of the room to face?
Hey man, we're doing what we can. We're having to make sacrifices too during 2020.
Got it going on.
This ain't a professional set you're looking at here, man. Yeah. We're hopefully, hopeful that in 2021, Lauren and I, yeah, same. Let's go behind the curtain. I got the ring light here too.
Yeah, buddy. That's what's up.
We're hopeful. And look, I will say this, and we've got more of these to go for the playoffs now, but Lauren and I have been doing these pregame and postgame videos for the whole football season. This is not a thing that we've ever done before, and it was different and something we wanted to try, and people have responded really well to it. We've loved the comments that we're getting every week.
Yeah, we appreciate y'all.
And you guys seem to really like this, so we're going to keep it going, and hopefully in 2021, you'll see us doing this from a studio again, because we're getting closer and closer every day to a time when things can get back to normal.
Hey, I even did a couple from the sidelines there. You remember I did one
That's right.
Game.
You did one in the rain on the sidelines.
Yeah. Technology, it keeps us just rolling. Hey, we do appreciate you guys. Faux show. We also want to say a big thank you. Well, Matt, I want to say thank you to you. Getting us through
thank you to you too, Lauren.
Yes, getting us through the regular season, and now we're rolling into the postseason. It's been a lot of fun, and we're going to keep this thing going until the very end. And we also want to say a big thank you to our sponsor, the Alabama Department of Labor. We appreciate you.
This video was brought to you by the Alabama Department of Labor. Visit your local career center today to learn about our on-the-job training program for employees and employers.